Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll just be starting in just a minute. Good morning or evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Bridge Builders webinar. My name is Stacy Nam. I'm the Joint Learning Initiative on Faith in Local Communities Senior Programs and Knowledge Manager. The Joint Learning Initiative on Faith in Local Communities is very happy to partner with a consortium with Tearfund UK, Tearfund Belgium, Tearfund in South Sudan, RedR UK, Islamic Relief Worldwide, Islamic Relief in South Sudan, and the University of Leeds on this Belgian government-funded Bridge Builders project. We believe this project exemplifies some of the ways we can promote capacity sharing and include local faith actors more fully in the localization of humanitarian response. Today I'll be just going over our agenda. We'll have an introduction to the model from Emma Tomlin. We will then have a video that shows the impact of the model featuring local partners, researchers, and one of the trainers. We'll then have a short question and answer session, followed by a 20-minute breakout and a period of time to report back from the breakout sessions. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Emma Tomlin, who is a professor at the University of Leeds. Emma, I think you're currently muted.
Sorry, all I said was hello and welcome, and I'm really looking forward to the discussions that we're going to have about this later on. I'm firstly just going to give an introduction to the model. So between 2018 and 2019, the consortium, which as Stacey's just said, included Tearfund, Islamic Relief, RedR UK, the JLI and the University of Leeds, implemented a pilot project to develop this bridge builder model in South Sudan. And based on the understanding that local faith actors play a key role in humanitarian action, yet are marginalised from the mainstream humanitarian sector, the project aimed to develop a two-way model that can be replicated elsewhere to build engagement and understanding between local faith actors and humanitarian actors. Can I have the slide, please, Stacey? So the bridge builder model is outlined on the slide. This is the outline of how the model works, and this is in our report. And the aim of this webinar this afternoon is to discuss the learning from this with respect to localization and capacity sharing. So just to summarize, the model included working with and identifying different local faith actors in South Sudan who wanted to be part of the project, and then inviting them to attend humanitarian skills training. They were then invited to apply for small grants to set up humanitarian projects in their localities with their communities. And alongside that, there was ongoing training and mentoring via WhatsApp. So there was a mentor from RedR UK, who you'll hear about later, who provided the local faith actors with ongoing training and mentoring. And then the other side of the two-way model, alongside this, we also offered some faith literacy training for humanitarians. And just something to mention now, which might be worth also coming back to in the discussion, was this group of humanitarian actors, the secular humanitarian actors, the international actors, were actually a much harder cohort to engage with and to bring into this work. We did run some sessions, but overall they were a lot more difficult to engage with, and we can talk about that later. So just in terms of some of the lessons learned and the recommendations from this work, I mean, overall we found from the interviews that we did that the project has improved trust and opened up opportunities for local faith actors to collaborate with international aid actors in South Sudan. And one of the ways in which we were able to capture the feedback from the local faith actors was because alongside the implementation of this programme that was funded by the Belgian government, we were also lucky enough to secure funding to carry out ongoing ethnographic research alongside the entire project. So I led on that with Olivia Wilkinson from the JLI, and also the individuals who carried out that research in South Sudan were Anthony and Qiwang, who you'll hear from later on. So we were able to capture a lot of additional information and learning that is often lost in this kind of project. So just to summarise with a couple of the recommendations, I think overall, we became very aware that greater efforts need to be made to bridge the gap between international humanitarian actors and local faith actors. Many local faith actors in the Global South are ready and willing to engage with the wider humanitarian system, but other actors can be hesitant. International humanitarian actors need to open themselves up to learning from LFAs and engaging in true capacity sharing. And I'll just mention one more thing, which is of course why you're all here, as we want to share this with you. The Consortium recommends scaling up and adapting the Bridge Builder model in other contexts. This would allow for widespread collaboration between LFAs and other humanitarian responders and increase support and training for LFAs who are seeking them. If anyone's not familiar with this term LFA, it's local faith actor. I should just say that sometimes these terms can be confusing if you've not heard them before. So local faith actor, LFA, you'll be hearing more about LFAs later on. So I am now going to hand over, and you can see a video with some feedback from our collaborators and participants on the project. So thank you. More later from me.
Thank you, Emma. So I'm Osmawani Osman, and I'm going to be introducing the LFAs that's kind enough to record the video, and also we'll try to share my screen now. So the first one that will be speaking would be Zabit Musa Loro. She's the Executive Director of the Islamic Development and Relief Agency, IDRA. So Islamic Relief in South Sudan trained and supported IDRA, and IDRA carried out wash and livelihood projects for crisis-affected communities in Tearfund County, in Tearfund State. And I think Zabit will be talking in the video about whether or not the model has helped in progressing localization amidst COVID-19. And after Zabit's message, we'll hear from Colin Walker. I believe Colin's joined us as a participant today, and Colin has also recorded a video, and he has provided in-person training and remote coaching support to the local faith actors during the duration of the pilot project. So without further ado, let me just share the video now. Can everyone can see my screen? It's all right?
Bridge Builders program is that it equipped us with knowledge on wash intervention programming, which have helped IDRA to implement COVID awareness programs at community levels, like awareness on infection, prevention and control. Why work with local faith actors? Local faith actors are the custodians of the communities they operate in and are directly linked with the communities and religious leaders in their forums, which makes it easy for community entry and acceptability of programs. The communities have much belief in local faith actors through their religious leaders, and this makes behavior change programs to create an impact in the communities. Since local faith actors have easy access to communities, through community and religious leaders. Participatory approach is easy to implement, which makes program implementation cost effective. It's easy to achieve sustainability of the project when working with local faith actors, since the local faith actors can easily change the mindset of the communities.
I developed and trained the 3 courses in humanitarian skills for local faith actors. So this was a really innovative project. It empowered local faith actors with project management skills to carry out short-term emergency response projects, as well as to work alongside the international NGOs and the UN cluster system. I also coached 7 of the LFAs during the implementation phase. There were lots of challenges, as Wi-Fi network was not always present, so I coached over WhatsApp by sending voice notes and photos. Some of the staff even travelled many miles until they could access 3G. I saw LFAs grow in confidence and good accountability. Yeah, I would really recommend bridging the gap, especially during COVID-19. LFAs have amazing access to affected people, and they really understand the cultural context. I'm still in touch with many of the people that I worked with and coached. We became very good friends, and also because there's such a need for long-term support during complex emergencies and crises.
So those were that was Colin and that was Zabib. And now we're going to go to the reflections of the 2 researchers, as Emma mentioned, that were alongside the program.
Was extremely significant in illuminating the importance of the role of local faith actors in humanitarian response. They have been responding to crisis and conflict for a very long time, but for some reason, their role, their contribution was largely invisible. So the objectives of the project sought to understand the reasons behind this invisibility, but also sought to understand their work, to also understand the challenges and be able to support. The research component was very significant because it brought out some of the issues that was not known to a lot of the key stakeholders in the area. And also the research and the capacity development and the overall project itself led to the facilitation of dialogue, understanding, and inclusion of local faith actors in the broader humanitarian response community. The report has been extremely important because it also touched on the importance of the local faith actors, the unique features they do have being connected to the community, understanding the community, and also the faith element. And the Bridging the Gap project was very important, and now a lot of the South Sudanese people, communities, and key stakeholders understand the role that local faith.
Research, because over the years there's been a lot of questions between localization, why not localizing the humanitarian response, why only international NGOs are the one in far front. That is the only way that we can engage, or the national NGOs can be engaged in humanitarian response. Number one, not only accusing them of lack of capacity, but also give a solution for the findings. Over the years, people have been talking, people have been complaining, they have been blamed to lack capacity, but nobody was trying to address their capacity in a complete way, the way Bridging the Gap did.
The challenge of working with international humanitarian organizations, one of them is that the humanitarian organizations lack flexibility in programming, which is very important when implementing projects in challenging environments like South Sudan, where it may need log frames and budget realignment during implementation course. This is mostly due to the fact that these organizations have long systems that involve their offices, their stakeholders from the main offices. The other issue is that international organizations have poor sustainability strategies in their programming, since they tend to hire experts from outside to implement projects, and these have less time to mentor local implementers to be able to improve on their capacity. Budget allocations for a project, when being subgranted by international humanitarian organization, is usually not commensurate with the scope of the activities, which lead to national local faith actors operating with difficulties during implementation of the subgranted projects.
So that was the video. So back to you, Emma, for a short summary.
Emma, I think you're still muted.
Sorry. So we've got about 10 minutes for Q&A, so I don't want to take up too much time summarising. But some of the key points that came up, Zubib emphasised the way in which local faith actors are custodians of communities, and linking with LFAs gives a direct link to affected communities. And often these communities trust their religious leaders, and this makes, it makes good sense to engage with them, because this can lead to behaviour change programmes that are more impactful and can make programming more sustainability. And Colin in particular drew attention to the innovative aspects of this project, of the Bridge Builders project, in the way in which sharing skills enabled local faith actors to carry out more effective emergency response, but also to work alongside international actors and the UN cluster system, so to begin to break down some of those barriers. So we've got about 10 minutes, as I said, for Q&A now. If people have questions, they're welcome to ask them in one of two ways, either to indicate that you want to ask a question by putting your hand up, so clicking on the hand button, but also you can type them into the chat as well, and we'll endeavour to either answer them in the chat or to bring them back to the rest of the group. So we'd be very, very pleased now to hear from you if you have any questions. There's a good number of the team here that worked on the project, so yeah, we look forward to having a discussion. So does anyone have a question? Or any comments or feedback or initial observations? Oh, right, okay, there's some coming up now in the chat. So this is from Casper, and he asks, is there any indication of sustainability of the capacity of the local faith actors? So does someone from the team want to address that question? Perhaps Zubib, what indications could you give already about how the Bridge Builders project has, enabled you to build capacity to engage in this sector and with international actors, and whether that's going to be sustainable or whether more work is needed to reinforce that? Maybe if the other members of the team could put their videos on, then we can see them respond to the questions. I can only see Masumi at the moment. Excellent. Asha, Ketty, Zubib.
Thank you very much, Emma. let me look at the question again. You said sustainability for the LFAs.
Yeah, so
I
sustainability
would
of,
say that
yeah.
one of the sustainability thing is that the training, the capacity building that was given to the LFAs is one thing that will sustain the LFAs. In that, LFAs have been able to continue with their progress. They are growing, and we are growing from where we actually bridging the gap found us to the level at which we are standing right now. I think the sustainability is there, that we are increasingly growing in capacity and implementation in the fields that as a sustainability thing, we are able to reach out to the communities, even during this time of COVID. And after COVID, we will still be there in the communities, using the same knowledge that we've been given during the trainings and the workshops and the knowledge we acquired from the trainings.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's move to another question now. This one from David Bone, who asks if we could say more about how we built trust with the local faith communities, and are there any lessons from the experience here? I wonder, Masumi, if you want to address that through your work with Islamic Relief in South Sudan. So more about, you know, how do we build trust with local faith communities, and what lessons can we learn from your experience in this?
I think, again, I mean, Islamic Relief, we have, I mean, we work in a lot of faith communities, not just Muslims, but also other faith communities as well. And I think one of the key ways of building trust with local communities is most local communities we work with have a very strong faith. And I think also the fact that the organization Islamic Relief is based on faith principles is I mean, even if it's not their own faith, it's still kind of has a lot of weighting, particularly because of the understanding of culture and rituals, and all this is very, very important. And also, I think one of the important things is, particularly as a faith organization and working in faith communities of different faith, is also emphasizing the message of impartiality and neutrality. And I think this is very different from what other humanitarian organizations do, the secular ones, but nonetheless, it is still very, very important, because I suppose one of the biggest fears of working with faith organizations or with faith communities, and if you're also a faith community, is this whole fear of proselytizing or conversion. So that is always a challenge, and that always needs to be countered. And one of the best ways of doing that is to emphasize the neutrality and impartiality of the organization as well, and also its values. And the values are quite universal. For example, for Islamic Relief, our values are excellence, custodianship, justice. These are 3 of the 5. I don't remember all 5. It's always difficult to remember. But these are values which has a resonance in people of all faith and none. And this is how, as Islamic Relief, we build trust, and also build trust by working with faith leaders, but also with trusted community members as well. And because faith leaders, as Zabib said, and also Emma reiterated, are people who have great standing and trust and support in their own communities. But again, I would say one caution about working with faith leaders is it's just not about working with any faith leader, because that just picking any faith leader and working with them could also have a negative impact. It's also choosing your faith leaders very carefully, whether they have the support and the standing, just not of the people, but also of the local authorities and the government as well. So these are some of the some of the approaches we take to kind of working in faith communities and building trust in those communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Masumi. Thanks very much. And we've got a couple of hands up now, so I'll take one of those. Mujam Momen, you've got your hand up. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can, just about, yes.
Okay. My question actually leads on from this point that Masumi just made, and That was, well, it's a two-part question. Would I be right in thinking that this term, local faith actors, I just want to sort of dig into that term a little. Are we I don't know whether you kept statistics on this or not, but are we talking primarily about local religious leaders or other faith actors, or who are not professional religious professionals, if you like? Because the reason I ask that question is a concern that by focusing on religious leaders as local faith actors, you may be actually enhancing the power of local elites to the detriment of other local people.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I'm just going to make one point very quickly and then pass over to my colleagues. In the report, one of the tables outlines our understanding of what a local faith actor is. So you're quite right that local religious leaders is one aspect, but it has to be much broader than that. Asha, you were nodding. I wonder if you want to add something here.
Sure. Thanks, Mujan, for that question. Certainly, when we look at local faith actors as a consortium, we were keen to work with not just those from formal NGOs, but also local religious leaders, because many of them, as has been emphasized during the last few minutes, have a lot of trust from their community. And what was interesting in this project was that many of the local faith NGOs that historically Tearfund and Islamic Relief and others in this consortium have partnered with were keen to work with other more local province-based, not national level kind of faith bodies, but very much at the grassroots. And some of them were local NGOs and some of them were local religious leaders. But I think one of the questions you asked was whether supporting them in their humanitarian response might be to the detriment of other leaders in the community. Is that right?
No, not. What I'm saying is that if you support local religious leaders, are you in effect increasing the power of the local elite and disempowering ordinary people in the community?
That's a good question. I wonder if, so we have a couple of local faith groups who were part of the program on this call today. So I wonder if Ernest Segar, who is part of SEDS, might want to answer that question, or we have someone else from the Diocese of Kajukeji, I believe, as well.
Yes, so Ernest, it would be good to hear your thoughts on this. And I think you have your own question as well, but be good to hear from you, Ernest. Do you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I actually raised my hand to not ask a question, but also just give some light. So basically, there was a question in sort of collaboration with the UN, just to try and address the question of local faith actors. So basically, you will find like in a place where we were working, it was not just working with the local church leaders only, but there are other respected religious leaders we were working with. But in terms of churches, you would also find that also there were associations in churches, like women's associations, like CBOs, like church-based CBOs, and us ourselves also as an organization. And in terms of collaboration with the UN, there was a question in terms of collaboration with the UN. You'll notice that some of these organizations, associations, faith-based associations were not part of like the cluster. So we actually introduced them to the cluster, and they're actively even currently participating. And there was quite a lot of response in terms of COVID-19 WASH response, that a lot of local faith actors and church-based organizations who have actually participated in that. Again, there was also recently, there was a flood response, which again, these church-based organization and local faith-based actors are also participating. So we actually have been working very, very closely with them we have seen there is a lot of, in terms of collaboration, in terms of participation, and also in terms of focus from just how do we make sure that we reach the hard to reach population. I'll give like a good example where we work. There is a Will North. So a Will North, like currently, is completely cut off, like because of flooding. Nobody can get there, but we're still able to like take the wash core pipeline supplies for response and give them to one of the churches that we worked with there, and they're actually doing the distribution. So yes.
Thank you, Ernest. I don't know how much longer we have left for questions, but I just wanted to, one question's just come up. We're not going to be able to go through all of them. I was just wondering, Jane says, whether or not you also work with community leaders such as chiefs, apart from formal faith leaders of the world religions, if you like. And I think that's a really useful point. And the Bridge Builders model certainly encompasses engaging with traditional leaders as well, not just leaders of the world religions. We didn't within this project, but it's certainly relevant for other groups to take up, and something that we would, like to do in any future work on this topic. So that's a really helpful question. Okay, so Stacey suggests that this is probably a time to end the Q&A, and we're going to move on to breakout groups. So I'm going to pass back to Stacey now to explain how that's going to operate. So thanks very much.
Actually, I'll hand it over to Asha, who will.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No problem.
No problem. Before we move into breakouts, I was just wondering if Colin Walker, who was one of the mentors and coaches on this program, who's also on this call from RedR UK. Hi, Colin. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. I wondered whether, I know some of the coaching you did, as was mentioned earlier, was through WhatsApp and through voice notes because of the internet connectivity issues in some parts of South Sudan. Did you contact religious leaders who were perhaps non-traditional, in the sense not just pastors or imams, but as Ernest mentioned, there were some women's associations represented. Were there other groups?
Yeah. So, well, all the kind of the coaching which I was involved with was all with the local faith actors themselves. But the amazing thing was that I just know that each of those local faith actors they had all sorts of connections and network with a whole variety of other people. So even though I was kind of mainly focused, on kind of coaching the people that I had been in touch with and had been involved with, just being able to train throughout the whole of the Bridging the Gap project, it was just amazing to me to hear of their links into kind of isolated rural groups. And so so I just know that so much of the kind of learning and experiences from this project were able to go kind of like far and wide beyond this project. So yeah, the kind of online coaching and mentoring coaching that I did, it was through Skype, for those NGOs which did have kind of like Skype access, but also, as was mentioned, we had communities some of my coachees who walked far in order to stand on a particular hill or under a particular tree in order to kind of get access to 3G so that it was just amazing. To be based so far away but to be able to be in contact with them. So yeah, I think so much can be done these days, even from a distance. So yeah, I think I was just so impressed with the people that I coached, just with their enthusiasm, their commitment, And yeah, and I think, yeah, there was a question about, you know, whether we, through our mentoring or, you know, these particular people, were other people in these communities, were they also able to have a voice? But, you know, I think the people that we mentored, you know, they were able to stand up for those other people who maybe would not have had an opportunity to have a voice in that aspect. So yeah, I think it was very exciting. I was really encouraged just by their commitment and enthusiasm, and actually just to hear over the last couple of weeks, actually, you know, of the projects that they are doing at this time. So it, you know, instead of being shut down, they really have been able to continue to engage with.
Thanks, Colin. Sorry.
Other NGOs.
Thank you so much, Colin. I hope I didn't cut you off there. I think my computer froze for a second.
No.
Thanks. Thank you very much. We are now going to move into a time of breakout discussions. It's really encouraging to see participants on this call from all kinds of humanitarian backgrounds. And it would be great to listen to each other and learn from each other on what our experience has been, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Have we seen better kind of collaboration between local faith actors and other humanitarian responders? So Stacey is going to put us into breakout groups, and we have 15 minutes. I know it's a short time for us to explore these questions, but hopefully each of our breakout groups will have a leader who will facilitate the discussion, and we're going to look at two questions in particular. Firstly, how does the Bridge Builders model compare to other localization approaches that you're familiar with? And secondly, has the COVID-19 pandemic helped progress localization in your context? So some of you here are from donor agencies, some are from international humanitarian organization, and others are from local, local NGO backgrounds or other backgrounds. So each one of us will have a different experience of responding to COVID-19. It'd be great to hear from each other. So please do stay on after the breakout discussions, because we will have a time of coming back, hearing from each other as a bigger group before Emma shares some of the next steps. Thank you.
Then as an organization, I suppose the basic and minimum criteria we set was they had to be registered, they had to have a physical office, they had to have some sort of a governance structure in place. I mean, it didn't have to be written out, but again, and then they had to have some kind of record of having done work before. Again, and these were kind of the minimum, but even then it was quite difficult. And I remember with the Muslim organization, we selected 2, but there were about 3 others who didn't get grants, but they were still part of the training. So they were still participated in the trainings, but it's just that they didn't have the grants because they didn't meet the criteria for the grant element of the project. So yeah, so those were the other kind of elements.
Thank you very much. Can we take maybe a minute each to listen from the other group leaders? Emma, would you like to share some top lines from your discussion?
Yes, we didn't get onto the second question, actually. We got so tied up in the first one. But yeah, I mean, this being a really innovative project in focusing on faith actors, where, you know, a lot of most localization projects haven't specifically focused on faith actors. In fact, others in the group couldn't think of anything. And also this project did something rather different in working with the LFAs step by step. working with them on the practical skills and, then the chance to put them into practice. So this was a very unique practice, a very unique project in the sense that, it worked along all the different stages and provided accompaniment as those stages progressed. And that really hasn't been seen in other places. We also discussed challenges around due diligence and compliance. And, there was a bit of work to do for the organisations to get over these and to get through the vetting process. I'll leave it at that and let someone else take over.
Thanks, Emma. Katie, over to you. I think you helped facilitate one of the discussions.
Yes, what we discussed, the point was made that localization discussion seems to be largely all about funding, how to fund locals directly, but this BTG model actually involved LFAs in delivery, so that was flagged. The positive, it strengthened community trust and hope in LFAs. LFAs were able to deliver what was promised. Even during COVID times, the LFAs continued responding to emergency needs in their communities. That shows and improves the sustainability, related to the sustainability question of some of the capacity building elements from the project. An interesting question was raised about the recognition of partnership from internationals of LFAs and how to move beyond LFAs being still tools for implementation for internationals, and how to engage in meaningful partnership and bridge the gap between internationals and LFAs. So we talked about that the project has tried to work with internationals, try to bring these actors together, but what the lessons learned is we need to rethink how more effectively engage the internationals who still have questions about how to implement in practice this partnership with LFAs, although on a rhetorical level, perhaps they do agree and recognize the strength and the benefits of the local faith actors. We talked also about the challenges and what was lacking, and it was mentioned that perhaps transition plan and continuation of activities beyond the project is something that needs to be properly thought through. There were lots of good things that was acknowledged, but how to make sure that we share the achievements from the projects and the work that the LFAs have done more widely. Obviously, today's webinar is an attempt to do that, but more is needed.
Thank you, Katie. Zabib and Mausumi, would you like to share from your group?
Yes, I took the notes. So Zabib, you can if there's anything specific you want to say, you can add. But just start with, yes, I mean, I think in our group we had a discussion about the unique features of the model, and it was recognized that it was a very unique model, and there's a need for such a model. And some of the unique features was something which Zabib highlighted, was that the capacity building and that kind of running in parallel with the opportunity to also then translate the knowledge uptake into practice through the grants. So, and she said it's usually one or the other. You usually either receive a capacity building training or you receive a grant, but yes, it kind of never goes hand in hand. So that was one of the things which was different, and also one of the things, again, which was different in the model, which I think Chris from Tearfund, was it CAFOD? Tearfund spoke about, was Tearfund also had kind of similar models where they worked with kind of the evangelical alliances of churches in Liberia, and it was a challenge to kind of get the kind of faith organizations to engage with the UN system and vice versa as well. There is a sort of a kind of I wouldn't say distrust, but also lack of understanding how each works. So that was something which this project tried to deal with. It was just the beginning. It's still a long journey, and I don't think we kind of managed to reach the end of the journey within that. But there was also opportunities for linkages between the local faith actors and also not just the UN system, but also other international humanitarian agencies in South Sudan to come together to kind of listen to each other, kind of in some ways build a bridge between them, and start off a dialogue and also start networking. So that was different. And there was a question which also Chris raised, was about how, particularly through the grants, what was different, or what did the local faith actors do differently? I suppose, and the response to that was, what was different was the size of the grants themselves, because at least with the kind of Muslim local faith actors we were working with, they weren't used to large volume of money, and that itself was different for them. And the fact that they also could kind of implement a project with kind of the skills and the knowledge they acquired through the humanitarian skills training, kind of building in gender analysis and a needs analysis, and also monitoring and evaluation, focusing on results. So those were things which we take for granted. I mean, we do it without thinking, but for the local faith actors, that is something very, very new for them to understand how the international humanitarian system works, and then to translate some of those workings into how they build their own projects was different. I think that's what we, and also there was we did kind of very briefly get to the question on COVID-19 and whether that helped localization or not, the project. And what Zabib said was, yes, it definitely did. The Bridging the Gap Consortium, which build the bridge builders model, I mean, it kind of not only increased and enhanced their capacity, but also their visibility within the system, humanitarian system in South Sudan. So this year they actually represented the kind of civil society and also Muslim LFA, local faith actors, particularly in the HIV and COVID response. So yeah, so that there's that question of sustainability as well. So they have been engaging and things which they probably wouldn't have thought about doing before. So that's kind of, again, a contribution that the project made.
That's really encouraging to hear. Thanks for sharing, Masumi and Zabib. Stacey, did you also help chair a discussion? Would you like to share with us now?
Yes, so my group had a discussion on unique and common, I guess, qualities of this model. And actually, I might pass it on to David, who took a few notes for our group, if you're willing to share a couple of the just things that we chatted about.
Sure, Stacey. So we began with the question of how is the model different, and there was actually a silence about that initially, which was speculated perhaps it wasn't entirely clear how this was a distinctive model, which made that difficult for some people to respond. But we did get into a little bit further and talked about the elements of accompaniment coming alongside the local faith community, really empowering them to work together with other organizations, recognizing some of their value and contribution in the community and so on. From there, we moved on to the question of how has COVID progressed localization. There was a description of how some of the initially, we'll say pre-COVID, the existing programs were perhaps more isolated and focused from other elements in the community, and with COVID, there was much more of an emphasis upon reaching more broadly across the community. So in that sense, COVID may have accelerated some of the localization. And then suggested from my own experience that the transition from an earlier program to responding to COVID perhaps reinforced for some of the program participants how some of the key initiatives they are working on really applied broadly across different kinds of crises. And so really help them to think about the important role they're playing in the community in a more fundamental way, not specifically just to a discrete crisis, but often many of the underlying issues in a crisis apply broadly in a community. So COVID was really advancing that understanding and that role in the community. Then the question came up regarding the role of women. And it was mentioned that there are some program partners that were focusing on gender-based violence, providing some field training to women and generally working on women's issues, but pointed out that the role of women really implies something different. It's not women as recipients of program activities, but women as key agents of community change. And so we were really wondering then, how does this model seek to really engage women? And then we ran out of time. So I actually think that that could be an entire program by itself. Just an observation, but I think many times you run into some real local cultural barriers when we begin to think about changing the role of women. So how a model like this could address that kind of issue, I think would be a very interesting conversation. So
Thank you very much,
Stacey.
David. Thanks, David, for sharing. I am now going to pass it back to Emma.
Okay, thanks, Asha, and thanks, everyone. I'm just going to very briefly wrap up now. We've overrun by 10 minutes, so thanks to so many people for sticking around. The first thing to say is that we'll write up the notes from the groups and we'll make those available to everyone. The second thing I wanted to say is, if anyone wants any more information on this or thinks it's something that they might like to try out, do get in touch with us. This project, in the end was about 18 months, but we were only funded for a year. It was complicated, we haven't been able to go into all the nuances and details in this. So please do get in touch, and we'd be happy to work through it and answer any questions. The other thing to say, just very quickly, is that we've got an enormous amount of research data. So we're currently writing that up into at least 2 journal articles, and these will be available in open access journals, hopefully Humanitarian Studies journal articles. So any of you will be able to download them, or we can send links and updates when they're ready. So they'll have a lot more depth and detail and analysis in them than we were able to include in the shorter report that we produced. So I think they're the 3 things that I wanted to say. Stacey, is there anything else to add at this stage? Anything you'd like me to finish on?
Yeah. No, I think that's all.
All right. Well, thanks to Stacey for making all this possible in the background there with the technology, and thanks to the contributors, and thanks to all of you for participating and for coming along today. And we look forward to staying in touch with you. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.